Okay, Dr. Haley Gemara. We're starting from the Mishnah on Tadikei Amud Beis. Almana Nizainis Minichse Yosayim. An Almana who's getting Mizainis from Nichse Yosayim, Ma'isi Yodea Shalahen. Her Ma'isi Yodayim go to the estate. Ve'ein Chayoven Bikfurasa. But the estate is not Mukhliv to bury her. Yerusha Yosy Kesubos Chayoven Bikfurasa. Her Yerushim, those who get her ksuba and her nichsim alug, they are the ones who are mechuyev to bury her. Zog tehelev gamor. Iboyelahu. Nizonis tanan. Does the Mishnah nizonis, which means an almana has a right to be nizain from the nichsi yesayim, whether or not the yesayim want, or the yesayim have an option to pay up the ksuba and stop her from taking nizanis. And our Mishnah is speaking about an almana who happens to be nizanis, meaning because the yesayim haven't paid her off yet. Zog to Gemara, nizanis pnan, do you say it's a psak that it's nizanis uch anshe Galil, like the people of Galil who paskind that we force the yesayim to be mazoner and we don't allow them to pay her off? And they don't have the option not to be mazoner. Or maybe the Mishnah is just saying a woman who happens to be getting her mazonas from the estate, like the people of Yehuda. And if they would have wanted, they could pay her up to ksuba, and in fact, they would not have to give her mazonas. So that's the Gemara Shaila. What does our Mishnah hold? Does our Mishnah hold that the Yisraelim, the state, has the option to pay off the ksuba and not give her mazonis, or are they forced to give her mazonis? Zog to Gemara Toshma, and we're going to turn now on to Daf Tzadik Vav Amaral. Toshma, Omer Abzeir, Omer Shmuel, Mitzias Almana, the Mitzia of an Almana, La'atma, she gets the key. Zok to Gemara, if you say that the estate has the option to pay her off, shopper, it makes sense why she should get to keep her own mitzvah, like Rashi says, because we'll say that it's speaking, we'll say that Shmuel's halacha is referring to, okay, so Shmuel's halacha that an almana will keep her mitzvah is in a case where she's not getting money from the estate for mizonis, and therefore she gets to keep her mitzvah. However, if you learn that the Mishnah is telling you halacha that she has a right to get mizonis whether they want to or not, well then the hava kabal, the estate, should have the same rights over what she produces as her husband would have. Ma baal mitzias isha labayla, just like a baal, the mitzvah of a woman belongs to her husband. Whatever a woman finds on the street belongs to her husband. Hakanami mitzvah ishal yarshim, being that the yarshim now are in place of the husband, because now they're giving her mizonis, they should be entitled to her mitzvah. So what's Pshat and Shmuel, who says that a woman and almana can keep her own mitzvah? So Kumar, you don't have a right from this, because la'olam ein malach mizonis. Even if you learn that they're mechlif to give her mizonis, there's still a svara to say that although they get her ma'aseh yadayim, what she earns in the job, they don't get to keep her mitzvah. Because time in my amar rabbanan mitzvah is ishal abayla. Why did the rabbanan say that the mitzvah of a woman goes to her husband? Is the loy to have a eva? It's only because it's frustrating and angering. Here I support her, and now she gets some windfall and she wins some lottery, and I don't get a share of it. But honey, when it comes to Yisraelim to have a eva, we're concerned that there shouldn't be eva between a man and his wife. But if there's eva between the estate and her, we don't care. It doesn't change anything. They'll still be mechuyev to give her mizonos. So there's no issue. And therefore, we do not grant the mitzvah of an almana to the estate, even though we do grant the mitzvah of a woman to her husband. All the malachas that a woman would normally do for her husband in exchange for mizonos, Almana oisel yarshim. And almana has to do for the yarshim, because that's part of what she has to produce for the estate, except for the following. Chutz mimizigas hakos, mixing drinks, v'atzos hamita, and setting the beds, v'achatos panav yodav v'raglav. And Rashi says, because shehein malachas hamakar v'schiba v'hergel dover. These are intimate type of malachas that are made for a husband and a wife. It's not just payment for her ma'aseh, for her mezainis. And Amr B'Shu ben Levi, kol malachas ha'eved oisel rabbi, all malachas that an eved normally has to do for his adai, Talmud oisel rabbi, a Talmud who's serving his rabbi, who does the same malachas, Hutz me'ataris minal, except for untying his shoes. And Rashi tells us, because that would make someone think that this person is in fact an Evet Knaini and will hurt his yichas. Omer Rava, but Rava says, Lo yamar, and when do we say there's a chash that people will think he's a real Evet Knaini? Ela b'makom she'ein makir noisai, in a place where they don't recognize this person. Ela b'makom she'ein makir noisai, if we're in a place where people recognize him, so everybody knows he's not an Evet. He's just serving his Rebbe, less lanba. There's no reason for him to refrain from untying his Rebbe's shoes. Amar Rashi said even more. Even if a makom shein makir noisai, even in a place where they don't recognize him, nami loy amar, we still don't prevent him from untying his Rebbe's shoes. Elul leimonach tefillin. That's if he's not wearing tefillin. Remember, in those days they used to wear tefillin all day. Avol monach tefillin. If this Talmud is wearing tefillin at the time, less lamba, because once again it's obvious that this is not an eved, because an eved wouldn't be wearing tefillin. It's just a Talmud respecting his Rebbe. Someone who improperly prevents a Talmud from being mishamashim, it actually is holding chesed back from his Talmud. It says in the pasuk, Lamas mere'eu chesed, holding back from your friend chesed. And Rashi learns this as lamas is actually a double word. It's hamemis atzmai mere'eu. So lamas mere'eu, if someone holds back from his friend, memis mimenu chasadim, holds back chesed from him. So lamas is read lamas is read in two ways. It's a double lamas. Lamas mere'eu means holding back from your friend. Lamas chesed, you're holding back chesed from him. That's one pshat in Rashi. The other pshat in Rashi is that the pasuk is referring to what was mentioned right before the area of the pasuk that was quoted. It says right before the pasuk, "V'sashia nitcha mimeni," help is pulled away from me. Why? Because lamas merei chesed, because I was held back from doing chesed. So it's an avra to prevent a Talmud from being mishameshu if in fact it's appropriate, because the Talmud benefits from that. If one does not allow his Talmud to be mishameshim, it actually takes your Shemaim away from the Talmud. Shenamar, the end of this pasuk of Lamas Merech Chased is the Yira Shaka Yazeh. The Yira Hashem will be abandoned. Amar Rabbi Lozer, Almana Shatovsa Metaltalin B'Mezayne Yisrael. That we know normally an Almana is only Nizon from the Chosim Shabadim from Karka, not from Metaltal. But what if she grabbed Metaltal? She wasn't supposed to, but she did. What she grabbed works. And Rashi explains, we don't take it away from her. Even though we say that she could only take from karka, not from metaltlin. But if she seized it, we let her keep it. V'chein ki yasser Abdili Omar, ma'ase bekalose shel Rab Shapsi, the daughter-in-law of Rab Shapsi, shetovsa diskia mois. She grabbed a bag made out of leather that was full of cash. And the Chachamim couldn't take it back. Why? Because her tfisa stands. Omar Avina, v'loya moron. We don't say this. That's only if she seized metaltlin to live off, because she needed food. But if it was to pay off her ksuba, we would take it away from her. Break the Gemara, what's the difference? Just like Ksuba, Be'ikr, what's Meshubed, Karka not Metaltlin, Mizonis is exactly the same thing. Mizonis Nami Makaki, Metaltli. So why is there a difference? If Tvisa works for Mizonis, why shouldn't Tvisa work for the Ksuba itself? Ella, Lumazoni, Mada Tafsa Tafsa, Hachanami Luksuba. If she seized Metaltlin from the estate of the Yosimim, it will work. She can hold on to it even if it's for Ksuba. Amalei Bitzuk Ben told the Rabina, Hachi, I'm reading Mishmei Rava Kavasei. We also paskin in the name of Rava, just like what you're saying, that a woman who's toifus, sai for Mizonis and sai for Ksuba, her tvisa stands. Rabbi Yochanan Mishmei Rabbi Yosy ben Zimmer. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Yosy ben Zimmer, Almana sheshasa shtayim v'sholosh shanim v'loy tova Mizonis. She let 2 or 3 years pass, and she didn't ask for Mizonis. Ivda Mizonis, she loses her Mizonis. And we're going to soon see, it doesn't mean that moving forward she can't ask for Mizonis. It means she cannot ask for Mizonis for back pay for what she was entitled to in the past. What does it mean, Shtayim B'Shaloshanim? Is it 2 or is it 3? Hasta Shtayim Ivda, if she waited 2 years without claiming Mizonis, she lost it, Shalosh Miboy, so of course 3. Of course, 3 she gives it up. So to Maloi Kasha Kambania Kambashira, a poor woman who struggles, she would have had to protest within 2 years, and if not, it's a right that she was moichel. But a wealthier woman, even if she didn't make a claim after 2 years, it doesn't mean she was moichel. She didn't need the money yet. So she has 3 years before it proves that she's moichel. Inami, or there's a different approach. Kamba Prutza Kamba Tzlua. A woman who's more in your face, not shy, she would have demanded it right away. And if she did it after 2 years, it's a right that she was moichel. But a tznuah, someone who's more timid, who's uncomfortable going to court, making claims, she, after 3 years, will consider it that she was not moichel. Amarava, loya moran elam afraid. This whole discussion of whether she's moichel or not, that means she's moichel her back pay up until this point that she didn't claim. But surely if she wants Mizonis for the future, Yeshla, surely she's entitled to Mizonis. Rabbi Yochanan had a shayla. What happens if Yisoyim Oimim Nosananu? And Rashi says it's referring to Demez Mizonis Lashon Haba. So they told her, we've already paid you a year in advance. So if you're going to come to us now for Mizonis, we've already paid you. And she said, no, you did not. Who has to prove them right? Do we say the muhsik is the Yisoyim, and she has to bring a raya that she wasn't paid yet in advance? Or do we say she's the muhsik, and they have to bring a raya that she was paid? So let's see, let's turn over onto Tav Tzadik Vav Amud Beis. Oops. Zok to Gemara, Nichse v'cheskes yasmi kaime. Do you say that the nechasim that are in the estate are considered in the chazak of the Yisayim, and therefore she is the moitzi mechaveri b'ol of haraya, or the bal alman lavi raya, or delma nichse v'cheskes almana kaime, since they're nishtabet to her because of the tnai bezin that she's entitled to mizonis, we look at it like she's the mochsin. And the Yisayim have to bring a raya that they paid already. The question is, what type of raya could the almana bring that she wasn't paid? How do you bring a raya that you weren't paid? So Rashi says this is the raya she would bring. She would bring a raya to hoidu Yisayim bifneim. She has to bring a raya. She has to have Aiden who say the Yisayim told us shaloi kibla. The Yisayim told us that we didn't pay yet. So even though now they're claiming in Bezin that they paid, we have Eidim that the Yisomim admitted that they haven't paid. So Zoktamar Tashma. Let's see what halach is. The Tani Levi taught us, Almana, calls the man Shalanisis till she remarries, so she's still in the state of an Almana, Allah Yisomim Lahavi Rai. You say you have to bring a raya, which tells us that we consider all of the assets in the estate in the muhsuk of the woman, and therefore, if she claims she wasn't paid, they have to bring a raya that she was paid, or else they have to pay her again. But Nisis, once she married, Rashi says, and she's asking for mizonis for the past, then she has to bring a raya. So if she didn't get married yet and she's asking for the future, then they have to bring a raya to their potter. But if she's getting married, so she's if she's married already, so they're no longer mechuyev to give her mizonis, because the Naksuba only gives her mizonis until she remarries, and it's a question only of the past, then she has to bring the raya. Okay, Gavaldik. Amr Absimi Barashi. Kitanoi. Let's say this shaila as to whether or not we consider her the muhsik on the assets, or the Yosy the muhsik of the assets, let's say that's totally the machlok is tonight. Because we learned as follows: Mecheres v'koseves, when a woman sells property to get her mizonis or to claim her ksuba, she has to write what she sold it for. So in the shtar mechira, where she sold property to a third party from the estate, she has to write Elu l'mizonos macharti. This sale was for mizonis. It was to satisfy her claim of mizonis. And this was to satisfy her claim on the ksuba. So let's just stop for a second. If she's selling, why would she want to be selling to satisfy her ksuba? Wouldn't it make more sense for her to sell to satisfy her claim for mizonis and save her ksuba for later? Because once she's paid off on her ksuba, she can no longer claim mizonis. So Rashi's masbir that she's only allowed a certain amount of money per year. What if she wants to go over that? So then her only reason to be able to sell to justify a sale is if it's to satisfy some of her ksuba. So in each of her transactions, the shtar mechira has to identify what the sale was for. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's as far as Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosy Omer moicheres v'koseves stam. She doesn't have to declare in the shtar mechira what it was for. She could leave it blank. And in fact, that'll actually work in her favor by not specifying what the sale was for, which the Gemara is going to explain soon. Let's say that the following is the explanation of the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosy. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Bar Lefushay, Rabbi Yehuda who says that it's incumbent on her to clarify what was the purpose of this, sale. Savar nichsei becheskes yasmikan. He holds that the nechatzim are really in the chazak of the assignment. The halman will be right, and the halman has to be right. So if she just has sales of property, the Yisraelim are going to say all those sales were for ksuba, and now that your ksuba is paid off, we no longer owe you mizonis. She'll want to claim that the sale was for mizonis, so she needs to have it specified in the shtar the sale was for mizonis, because otherwise they'll claim it was for ksuba and she'll lose out. But Rabbi Yosy suffer loy boy lefrushe, because nichse becheskas almana kami. So even if the shtars are left blank, she could still claim her ksuba from the assignment, and she could still claim that all of the sales that she made were for mizonis and not for ksuba. While the assignment will have you right. But Rashi explains, okay, that's why it's not necessary for her to leave it blank. But why is it actually better for her to leave it blank? Why does Rabbi Yosy say v'chein koicha yofa? The Rashi explains. Rabbi Yosy savar nichli b'cheskos almana kaimi. V'hi tachzuk b'hem l'tzorich mizoniseh uksubas. She's considered a muhsik on all the assets in the estate to pay off her mizonis and to pay off her ksuba. V'aleim l'havi raya. And they would have to bring a raya if they had a claim to say that she wouldn't have a right to take. Because of that, it's much better for her to keep it blank. Why? What about people who bought property from her husband when her husband was still alive? Those properties are also meshubed to her. She'im yichlu kol nichsei haYisayimim. What if all of the properties of the Yisayim get used up and she still hasn't finished claiming her ksuba? What could she do? She'll claim that everything that she sold so far was for mezainis and not for ksuba, and therefore now she can go after the lekuchos to claim her ksuba. If she identifies that she sold certain properties for ksuba, for instance, if it's because she was taking too much mezainis and therefore she had to declare someone's for ksuba, well, now she's reduced from her ksuba and she won't be able to collect from lekuchos for that amount. She will no longer able to get more. She won't be able to change it. If she identified in the star that it was for ksuba, she won't be able to say that it really was for mezainis. And to collect mezainis from the lekuchos, she has no right. It's only the ksuba itself that she can collect from the lekuchos for. So therefore, she's best off leaving it blank. So the Gemara here wants to say that the machlokes of Yosy and Yehuda is who is the muksik on the assets of the Yisayim. Is it the almana or is it the Yisayim? Zok to Gemara. Mimai. What is the raya? Dilma dechula alma nichsi becheskes almanakaim. Let's say both Rabbi Yosy and Rabbi Yehuda agree that the nechazim are becheskes alman. So then Rabbi Yosy makes a lot of sense. Leave it blank. Why would Rabbi Yehuda say you should write in it, this is for ksuba and this is for mezainis? And really, Rabbi Yehuda Eitz Toiva Kabashmalan. Rabbi Yehuda was just giving her an Eitz Toiva to identify some of the properties as having been sold for the ksuba, not for mezainis. You know why? Because if people see how much property she sold for mezainis, they'll think she's a fresser, and no one's going to want to marry her. Remember, she's an almana looking to get remarried. Who's going to want to marry a woman who's going to eat them out of house and home? The likru law Rav Sanusa. So even though it's compromising her position, legabe the Yisayim, but at least it's more important in Rabbi Yehuda's opinion to protect her image to the public so that she'll be able to find a ship. And I'll prove to you that this is a good teretz, that it's just an Eitz Toiva. The loyte mahachi, if you're not going to agree to this svara, that maybe Rabbi Yehuda is just telling her Eitz Toiva to identify some of the sales that were to satisfy the ksuba, is Hada boy Rabbi Yochanan Shaila, of who's the muksik. We could have brought a Pasha Teraya, never mind from this Braita that we quoted, but from a Meforsha Mishnah. Tivshit lei mimasnisa. We could have brought a raya from the Mishnah that we're going to be learning shortly. The Mishnah says, Mecheres lemezainos shaloi bevezdin. She can sell for mezainos shaloi bevezdin. V'chayseves, and she has to write in the star, Elu lemezainos macharti. So you see clearly from the Mishnah that she has to identify what was the purpose of the sale. So why wouldn't that be right, Rabbi Yochanan? You know why there's no right for the Mishnah? Because when the Mishnah says it's to tell us that she should identify what was for mezainis and what was not for mezainis, so it shouldn't look like she spent so much money. Hakanami, so too in this brisa, when we're explaining Rabbi Yehuda, we can argue Eitz Toiva Kamashma. So that's one teretz. So one teretz you don't have a raya from this brisa because everybody can hold that the almon is the muksik and Rabbi Yehuda was just giving her advice. Inami, or you can learn that both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosy duchul alma nichse b'cheskes yatmikani. Maybe everybody holds that in fact the raya is incumbent on her, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda says she has to identify what's for ksuba and what's for mezainis, because otherwise the Yisraelim will claim that everything is for ksuba. Behind Talmud Rabbi Yosy. So why did Rabbi Yosy tell her to leave it blank? Dr. Gemara kida abayik ishisha, like abayik ishisha, and that is so she should be able to collect from the kuchas, and she should be able to claim that it was all for ksuba. Now, but that puts her in a terrible position vis-a-vis the Yisraelim, because they'll claim it was all ksuba. So Rashi tells us, of course, she would need to have Adim to back her up. She would need to have Adim to say testimony that whatever she sold was for Mizonis. Why would Rabbi Yosy want us to leave it blank? It's doimel l'shchivmera. We know a matna shchivmera is chal. But what if he said, Tanu Masai Mezuz, Leploni Bachoi? Give 200 zuz to Reuven, who I happen to owe money to. But he didn't say I'm giving it to pay it back. He just said I'm giving it. So the person taking it, Reuven who's taking it, he could say I'm taking it as payback for my loan, and then that's all I get. Or or he can take it as a matana, and then he could still go collect his loan from the Yarsha. So of course, he's better off taking it as a matana. So let's turn over now Tzadik Zayin and Aleph. If he takes it as a matana, surely it's better for him because then he could still collect his choiv and he ends up with 400 zuz. So too with this woman, we're much better off with her leaving it unclear so that she could claim that everything was for Mizonis and not for Ksuba. And to protect herself from Yisraelim, she'll have Edom. Well, let's see Rashi on top. He'll be able to, the Mabul will be able to still collect Lekuchais for the chayv that was owed to him by the Shchivra. But he can take from Lekuchais for Matana. If the Shchivra gave him Matana, but there's no money to give him, he doesn't get anything. Afsu, so to this woman, she can't take from the Lekuchais to pay for Mizonis, but Valaksuba Titravaisa. What about the fact that she's putting herself in danger because the Yisraelim will claim everything was for Ksuba? And then when it's Kabbalah Ksubasayach, so we no longer owe you anything, that she has a way to protect herself from that. She can make sure that Vedim, who saw that what she sold was for the purposes of Mizonis, and if the Yisraelim deny and they don't want to pay her, and they tell her that she sold for Ksuba, she'll bring the Edim that will testify that whatever she sold was for Mizonis. But she won't talk anything about what was sold to the Ksuba because she wants to be able to collect from the Lekuchos. Okay. Tosfos has a little bit of a problem because it almost sounds like she really did take some of her Ksuba, but she's going to withhold that information from the Lekuchos and then wrongfully take from the Lekuchos. Because if technically she already took from her Ksuba, so she shouldn't have a right to take from the Lekuchos. So Tosfos is a very big Kiddush. And Tosfos says the reason why she could take from, normally you could not take Mizonis from the Lekuchos because it's unlimited. There's no way a Lekeich can protect himself from that. But a Lekeich can protect himself because he knows what the Ksuba is worth, so he can make sure that there's still enough money left in the estate to pay for the Ksuba when he buys property, so that'll protect his position. But she'll be able to say that you didn't protect yourself enough. You should have worried about Mizonis as well. So it's not so much that she's stealing, but it's a little bit shverla. But that's the Gemara. Zok the Gemara, Anusugya. Ketat Mecheres. When she sells, what is the process of a woman selling, liquidating property of the estate for her Mizonis, for Ksuba? Amar B'Daniel Bar Katina, Amar Huna. It's for Mizonis that we're asking. Mecheres achas l'shein. The question is that she liquidates a little bit every day because she needs to be fed every day. No, the law is she could sell enough property to support herself for a year. So let's say she needs $15,000 to survive for the year, so she can sell $15,000 worth of property in one shot. But the person who bought the property will not give her all the cash. The person who sold her the property will hold on to the cash. And the person who bought the property will give enough for 30 days at a time. So I guess the Lekeich will pay up in 12 installments every 30 days. Why? Rashi explains, so that just in case she remarries, and now the estate is not mechuyev to support her anymore, the Yosoimim will reclaim the money because the Lekech will now pay the rest of the money to the estate. She can't sell so much property to deal with 12 months at a time. Rather, she could only sell enough property to cover her for 6 months at a time. And the same thing, she only gets 30 days worth at a time. For Lekech mefarnes achas l'shloshim yom. Tanya kavasei Rav Huna. We have a brayta that supports Rav Huna. It says mecheres l'shnei maser chodesh v'lekech mefarnes achas l'shloshim yom. But we also have a brayta like Rabbi Yehuda. Tanya kavasei Rabbi Yehuda mecheres l'shisha kadoshim v'lekech mefarnes achas l'shloshim yom. Amar Amemar Paskins hilchos on mecheres l'shisha kadoshim. You can sell for 6 months v'lekech mefarnes achas l'shloshim yom. What about Rav Huna who says she can sell for a whole year? Amar Leah Meimer answered, Lo Shamili, I didn't hear of Rav Huna's vart. Kleimer Lo Shmirli, I disagree with Rav Huna, and in fact I paskin that she could only sell property for 6 months at a time. What happens if she sold a property that belonged to the estate to a lekech to satisfy the chiyuv of the estate to give her mezainis? Now she needs to collect her ksuba. Could she go back to that same lekech who she sold to satisfy her need for mezainis, take it back from him because it's meshubed to pay her ksuba? Ma'usha taksor v'titraf l'ksuba. The shaila is really totally in Rabbi Yosef's halacha. Dom Rabbi Yosef, I'm a losa dezovin, a woman, an almana who sells property of the Yosoimim, of the estate. She sells it with a chrayis. Whenever she's selling property of the estate, she actually is selling that property with a chrayis, and that if the lekeach loses it because it's seized due to a prior creditor, the estate has to pay back the lekeach. So who is the estate that has to pay back the lekeach? Rabbi Yosef said, "Achrayis hayasmi." They go back and claim to the Yosoimim. The estate will have to pay that achrayis. Uveidin dezovin, and what if Bezdin sells the property of an estate to fulfill a woman's needs? Once again, achrayis hayasmi. So therefore, frek the Gemara as follows: Ma kivun da achrayis hayasmi. Since it's not her problem to pay back these lukuchos, if someone seizes the property, it's the Yisraelim's problem. So therefore, Tarfa, let her go back, seize that property, and it's not a problem for her because they're just going to go take it from the Yisraelim, but she'll benefit. Or maybe the Lekech can tell her, or the Yisraelim can tell her, okay, you weren't mekabel achrayis if some other creditor took it away, but achrayis tinafshach. But if you yourself are going to seize it from us to pay for your ksuba, miloi kabula kabilas. That for sure should be on you. So that was the shine. Amarle. So he answered. So Rav Sheshes answered. Tinisua, we actually have a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Mecheres v'hoileches ad kidei kesubasa." She can continue to sell whatever assets are available to satisfy her need for mezainis, up until the point where there's only enough assets left to satisfy her ksuba. And then the samachla, she has a surety, she has assurance from the property that's remaining in the estate that she's not liquidating for her mezainis. She'll be able to collect her ksuba from that's remaining. So shema mina shiara in loy shayra loy. You see from me very clearly that she has to leave over properties, not sell them. But if she sold them, she would not be able to collect her ksuba from them. Fact Gemara, what's the right? That's what the Mishnah means. Maybe in fact she could sell them. But the reason why the Mishnah says she should sell up until the ksuba is v'dilma eitza toiva kamash malon. Maybe it's just giving her an eitza toiva that she shouldn't sell the property and then seize it back because it makes a bad reputation for herself. that she sells a property and then she takes it back. Zok Gemara, if it was just an Eitz Toiva, then the Mishnah would have expressed it differently. It became listening Goivik Subasim in Ashar. All it should have said was Goivik Subasim in Ashar. But it says, my Somachlo. It says beferish that Atnik Subasim is Somachlo, and that's her surety. That means that has to remain unsold. Shmamino Shiora in, Loi Shiora lo. It remains unsold, and that's what it's there for her. But if it was sold, she would not be able to claim it back for her ksuba. So we remain with the shaila of whether or not she can seize back on behalf of her ksuba. And the Gemara seems to bring, we don't remember this, I'm sorry, the Gemara seems to have a raya from the Mishnah that says that she cannot seize back what she already sold for her ksuba. Rather, she has to not sell that last bit of karka and make sure it stays in the estate of the Yosymim so she can claim her ksuba for it. Iboilu. What happens, nothing to do with a marriage. A regular person needed money because he was going to go to the marketplace and buy some product that he was going to resell. There was a good deal available. He was going to go stock up on product to sell. And in order to come up with capital, he sold the property. Iboilu Zovin. He sold the property because he needed $100,000 of cash to go buy some lot of, let's say, cows that he was going to sell. And then what happened is when he went to buy the cows, the person who was originally going to sell the cows backed out. So now he doesn't need the money anymore because he's not getting the cows. And he turns out that he doesn't need the money. Does he have a right to back out of the deal? Because he only sold his property under the assumption that he would need the cash. And when he actually sold it, he needed the cash. But by the time he came with the cash to buy those oxen, the person who was going to sell those oxen to him changed his mind. Can he back out of the deal? Tashma, let's see if we could bring a right. To govern the Zovin Araler of Papa. A person once sold property to her Papa. Why did the person sell this property to her Papa? Because he needed the money to buy oxen with. L'soif, after her Papa paid him, he took the money to go buy the oxen. The oxen was no longer available for sale, and he didn't need the money. Her Papa reversed the sale and gave him back his land. So you have a raya, he can back out. So that's not a raya. Rav Papa lefnim mishur zadin udavat. Maybe Rav Papa was doing lefnim mishur zadin. We want to know halalacha. Can you force the sale to reverse? So let's try another case. There was once a little bit of a hunger. There was a deficit of wheat. In the city of Nardo. So people were desperate because the price of wheat went up. Everybody sold their properties, their houses, because they needed to survive. And then, before they had a chance to buy wheat, which was very expensive, asuchiti, a shipment of wheat came to the city, and suddenly the price of wheat went down to normal, and now they want their houses back. Amalahu Rav Nachman Paskin, Dinahu the Hadri Apavni Lamarai. So you have a raya from here. Rav Nachman said it reverses the sale. So you have a raya from here that in fact you can back out. So you don't have a raya from there. Nami Zvini B'Tosa. In the case of Rav Nachman, at the time that they actually made the sale was no longer relevant. The ship with the wheat was already on its way to Nahardah while they actually sold their properties. Not like the case that we asked. At the time when he sold his property, he was expecting to buy those oxen, and those oxen were available for sale. So when he sold the property, it was fair and square. Later on, something changed that he couldn't get those oxen anymore. Who said that will reverse the sale? Here, while they were actually selling their properties, at that moment already, there was a mekach. There was no reason for them to sell their properties. They just didn't know that the wheat was coming, but the wheat was actually coming. So Rashi explains, if, for instance, there was no wheat coming at all when they sold their property, and then wheat was shipped out and it came along, that would be similar. But here the wheat had already been shipped out, it was already on its way. when they sold their properties. So maybe only over here does Reb Nachman hold that the sale gets reversed. But if it's a case where at the time of the sale was relevant and something changed later, maybe there the sale would not reverse. Ihachi, and Rashi learns, normally when you learn Ihachi, it's a kasha. Here Rashi is learning Ihachi, based on what you're saying, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. You know why? Because Hainu de Amr Lei, Rami Bar Shmuel, or Rav Nachman. When Rami Bar Shmuel heard about Rav Nachman's psak, he said, I don't like this psak. Because if you're going to allow people to reverse sales, nobody's going to want to engage in real estate purchases anymore. You're going to be machshel people lost lava because people aren't going to want to do deals. No one's going to want to buy property anymore because I'm going to go through all the expense and effort of buying property. Then 2 days later, you're going to change your mind. So that's what was Rami Bar Shmuel's comment. So what do you see from there? Amr Lei, so Rav Nachman answered, I don't know why you're so worried. Are you telling me that every day there's going to be a hunger in our door that is such a problem? Amar Lei, so Rami Bar Shmuel answered back in. As a matter of fact, absolutely. It's often that you have this type of scenario in the Hardal. And this last line, in B'tzorta ben Adam Mishka Shchicha, this is where the raya is from. As Rashi says, Shmami no, you see from here, you see that the reason over here why it was a problem is because the reason why Reb Nachman reversed the sale over here is because the ships were already on their way with wheat as they sold their homes. If the wheat was only shipped out after the sale, the time and then it would be similar to the original case of our Shaila, where at the time of the sale, they actually did need to do the sale, but only later on did they find out that they don't need it anymore. Well, then, that would be unusual. So it's not usual, it's very unusual for there to be a hunger in our door, and in the next door city, they should have plenty of wheat. And at the time of the sale, they didn't know anything about the other wheat. And after they made the sale, then first the wheat got shipped. That's an unusual scenario. Being that Rami Bar Shmuel said that this case here is a usual scenario, that means the case that we're talking about, which was usual, is there would often be problems in the Nardor region with wheat. And because of that, they would ship from other regions wheat into Nahardor. But by the time they were selling their properties to buy the wheat, the shipment was already on its way. So it's only in those cases where Reb Nachman said that you reverse the sale. But you don't have a raya from Reb Nachman that you would reverse the sale, even if at the time of the sale there was reason to make the sale, but things changed after the sale. There you don't have a raya, in fact, from Reb Nachman that the sale would be reversed. However, the hilchos of the Gemara Firzos is Zavim v'lo yitzricha le'zuzei hadris v'nei. L'maisa we paskin that the sale goes back anyway, and in fact, if you sell something because you wanted to buy something with the money, and whatever you wanted to buy didn't work out, in fact, will reverse the original sale. Zok tehelig mishnah almana bein min erison bein min nesuin. If a woman's an almana, whether she's from erison or from nesuin, moicheres shaloi bebezin. She needs money for her ksuba. So an almana min nesuin is getting mezonis, but an almana min erison doesn't get mezonis, but she does get ksuba. So the halacha is she's allowed to seize property from the estate and sell it even without bezin. Reb Shimon says, "Mina nesuin b'cheres shaloi b'bezin." If she's an almana min nesuin, she could sell shaloi b'bezin. And Rashi says, you know why? Because anyway, she could sell them as zonis. And when you sell them as zonis, that's when you could sell shaloi b'bezin. And the reason why you could sell shaloi bevezin if you're selling from Mazonis is because you don't have time for the process. You need food, and you need food now. Ksuba is something you can wait for. So since you can sell for food, you can also sell for ksuba. So therefore, Shimon says, but mina erison loisimker ela bebezdin. But mina erison you should only sell bebezdin. Why? Because mina erison there's no mezainis, and therefore she could only sell bebezdin. The whole she'ena mezainis, anyone who doesn't have mezainis, loisimker ela bebezdin should only sell bebezdin. And Rashi says, mecher shel bebezdin. She ev shala lios liyasheves umisana ad she's dakula bezdin. A woman who has mezainis, so she can't wait around till Bezdin goes through the whole process. She's got to eat now. Avomina Ersin, but if she's only an Almana Ersin, where she's not entitled to mezainis, Shein Mechiros Halutsuba, her selling the property is only for Ksuba, that's not a crisis. And therefore, Lesimker Ela Bezdin, she has to wait for Bezdin to do the process. Zok Gemara. I understand the Tanakama says that you could sell min nesuin without bezdin is because of the mezainis. But why would the Tanakama allow her to sell shaloi bevezdin even min ersin where you don't need where there's no mezainis involved? Zog to Gemara. Elon ersin my time, according to the Rabbanan. Amar ula mishum china. It's because of chein, meaning. If a woman knows that it's going to be a hassle for her to collect her ksuba, then she won't want to accept ersin. So in order that women should feel confident that they're going to get their ksuba easily without the hassle of bezdin, they wouldn't want to get married. And that's why even in Almanim and ersin, according to Rabbanim, they're allowed to sell without bezdin. A person makes an ersin to a woman, he's mekadosh a woman, and then he dies. He doesn't want his wife to have to schlep around to bezdin. It's humiliating. So therefore, it's part of his intention. He wants his wife to be able to collect easier. Maybe now, what's the difference between these two svaras? So the nafkamina is if he divorced her. If it's because we want to protect women and make sure that they're confident they'll get their ksuba, grusha nami boichni. That same svara applies if she's a grusha, so that even a grusha would be able to sell without bezdin to collect her ksuba. But if the reason why we let an arusa sell property without bezdin is not to savor humiliation, if he divorced his wife, he doesn't care if she has to go to bezdin. So the nafkamina between these two pshatim would be a grusha. And now we learn in the next Mishnah, Ugerusha Simker Ela Bezdin. A grusha is only allowed to sell with bezdin. Dr. Gemara Bishleim Lamanda Amar Levishain Adam Rosh to Savasha Ishtoi Bevezdin Grusha Leichbaslei. It fits in very geschmack according to Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan holds that the Rabbanan would be moida in the case of grusha that she has to sell bevezdin. Ela Lamanda Amar according to Ula, who said Mishum China that the Rabbanan's reasoning for an arusa, an almanim and ersin, being able to sell property for ksuba is because of chen. So grusha nami boy chen. We said a grusha needs chen as well. So tomorrow you're right. According to Ula, when it says in the next Mishnah, grusha lesimker ela bevezdin, it's going to go according to Reb Shimon. Hamani Reb Shimoni, it's going to go according to Reb Shimon, who doesn't hold of chen by an almanim and ersin. He holds an almanim and ersin does not get to collect from bezdin. Back to Gemara, Reb Shimon, if you're telling me that the next mission is halacha, that Ugrusha Simker El Bevezdin, Haltana L'Reisha, didn't Reb Shimon already just say in our Mishnah, Min the Ersin L'Simkar? So we already know he doesn't hold it as far of Chaim, and he doesn't hold it as far as Baza. So if that's the case, why did Reb Shimon have to repeat the same halacha Ugrusha L'Simkar again the next Mishnah, if we already know it from what he said until now? So Timur is a very big difference. Ma'udetema almonim in the erison who the loy nafish chenida, and almonim in the erison, her she has to collect with bezdin. You know why? Because we're not worried if an almonim in the erison collects with bezdin. That won't stop her from getting married again. Why? Because she wasn't developed. there was a kedushin made on her, so she was locked into a man, but she wasn't nevelis yet. So for that, she won't mind working hard to deal with Bezdin. Aval grusha, but a woman who's a grusha who was nevelis already, she'll feel horribly used if now she has to jump through hoops to collect her ksuba. The nofesh chendida, she would feel much more violated if she had a difficulty collecting her ksuba. Ema tivay chen, maybe a gerusha, maybe Rab Shimon would be moided by a gerusha that she could sell without bezdin. Kamash Malon, the second Mishnah, that a gerusha also does not collect without bezdin. The problem is, we know that already, because we learned in the Mishnah, Kol Shein Lamazaynos. It says Kol Shein Lamazaynos has to collect with bezdin. So what does it mean, Kol Shein Lamazaynos? Lasuya Mai. Lav Lasuya Gerusha. Wouldn't that be including a Gerusha? A Gerusha is one of the women who doesn't have Mazaynos. So that's what it's referred to. So we already know that a Gerusha doesn't have Mazaynos. So why did the second Mishnah have to speak about Gerusha again? So Dr. Marloy, Kol Shein Lamazaynos is actually to teach you a whole different halacha that has nothing to do with this subject. To teach you Lasuya Migureshes Fein Migureshes. The halacha is if a man gives a woman a get, but he threw the get in Rishus Rabbim, and there was Safek Karav Law. So this woman is Safek Mugureshes. The husband is still mechuyev to give mezainis to this wife. But if the husband dies after this get, the estate is no longer mechuyev to give her mezainis. And that's what this Mishnah is teaching us. Kidr Abzeir. Domar Abzeir. Kol Makam Shamu Mugureshes Fein Mugureshes. Baal Chayev b'mezainis. Whenever a woman is Mugureshes Fein Mugureshes, she's Safek Mugureshes, the Baal is Chayev to support her. And our Mishnah is saying, Kol she'ein lamazaynos, this same woman whose husband not to support her, if he dies, the Yisayim do not have to support her, and that's what the Mishnah is trying to tell us. That Yisayim do not have to support a woman who's Safek Mugureshes, even though their father did have to support her. Toshma, Kishem Shemaycheresh Shaloi bebezdin. The same way she can sell without bezdin, Tak Yershel Yorshik Subasa Moichin Shaloi bebezdin. So too, if she dies, her Yorshim, when they're collecting her ksuba, can also collect without bezdin. Like Rabbi Yochanan, who said that the reason for the Chacham was well, then it makes sense. The same way the father doesn't want his wife to be humiliated by having to run to bezin, he doesn't want the Yorshim to go through that embarrassment either. If it's only Batchein, Yorsheh, who are boys, they're not going to be afraid of getting married. What if she didn't have any sons? She only had daughters, or she only had a sister. So if they have a hard time collecting their sister or their mother's tzuba, they're not going to want to get married. And therefore, in such a case, there's still a svara that they should be able to sell without bezdin. Zok the heilige Mishnah weiter. Machra Kesubasa, she sold her ksuba. And what it means is she sold property to cover her ksuba. Oy miktsasa, or she sold enough property to cover part of her ksuba. Mishkana ksubasa, or what if she gave the ksuba as collateral for a loan, or the property she gave as collateral. So what is the halacha? Oy miktasa, or part of it, or nosna ksubasa l'achar, she gave it to somebody. Oy miktasa, or part of it. Loy simker as a shar el bebez. The rest of the ksuba she now could only sell in bezdin. Okay, the Chacham say no. My cheresi afilu arba v'chamisha pamim. She could sell even 4 or 5 times. So let's get a little bit clarity over here. The first time in the Mishnah says if she sold a ksuba or part of her ksuba, the rest has to be sold with bezdin. So Rashi tells us this is Reb Shimon. It's Reb Shimon Carmelo The Omar Ein Moicheres Shaloi Bebezin Ela Mezonis. Rabbi Shimon said the only woman who could sell without bezin if she's selling for mezonis. V'zu, and this woman Mikivin Shegov Samiktsasa. Rabbi Shimon is telling you a chiddush that once a woman already collected even part of her ksuba, even though part of her ksuba is still outstanding, but she's already been given part of her ksuba, Ein La Mezonis. She is no longer entitled to mezonis. V'hachi Mukla Begemara Rabbi Shimon. So therefore, the Tanakama is Rabbi Shimon, who holds that once part of the ksuba has been liquidated, she's no longer entitled to mezonis. Rabbi Shimon told us in last Mishnah that a woman who's not entitled to mezonis may not sell anything without bezin. She could sell it in bits and pieces, and she can still sell for mezonis because the Chachamim obviously hold that even if she sold part of her ksuba, she's still entitled to collect mezonos. Okay, because and she has to write. We saw this earlier. The she has to write the mezonos macharti, that she sold it for mezonos. And remember, the Gemara told us in one shot that it's an eitzah toiva. The reason why she has to write that she sold it for mezonos is because she needs to identify that not all of it was for mezonos. Otherwise, people are going to think that she's too expensive and no one's going to want to marry her. And then the grusha lesimker ela bebesin. A grusha should only sell bebesin. And we said it's a shaila if this is going according to Rabbi Shimon, who holds that anyone who doesn't get mezonos has to sell a besin, or if it's going according to Tanakama, but that would only fit in according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that he doesn't want his wife to be embarrassed, his almana to be embarrassed, but a grusha he doesn't care about. But according to Ula, who said that the reason why he's an almana min ha'ersin is because of china, grusha has the same chen. So therefore, a grusha would also be able to sell without bezin. Okay, beautiful. Zok Tehelig Gemara. Mastis and Mani. Who's the Mishnah? Going like Reb Shimon. Like we said earlier, it's going according to Reb Shimon, who holds that once part of the ksuba is liquidated, the almana may no longer ask for mezonos. The Tanya we learned, machar ksubasa, if she sold all of her ksuba, mishkina ksubasa, she was memashkin all of her ksuba, asa ksubasa poiteki la'achar, she made her entire ksuba in the poiteki, ein la mezonos, she is not entitled to mezonos anymore, but part of her ksuba, she's still entitled to mezonos. Rabbi Shimon Neimer, afal pishalei machar v'la mishkina ksubasa l'machtzisa, even if she only partly gave away her ksuba of the mezonos, she lost the mezonos. So the pasuk says when it talks about the ksuba, it says kesef yishkal k'moyer habasulos. So the question is, when it says kesef, when we say that she has ksuba owing to her, does that mean the entire ksuba is owing to her, or only part of the ksuba owing to her? Reb Shimon clearly says that the whole ksuba has to be owing to her. Otherwise, we don't consider that there's ksuba owing to her, and therefore she cannot collect from mezonos. While the Rabbanan hold, even if part of the ksuba was owing to her, she could still collect mezonos. So Zok to Gemara, Lemeimer Reb Shimon Sovar, the Amrina Nixes Kesef Kakol Kesef. You're telling me that Reb Shimon says, Reb Shimon understands the word Kesef, Yishkoil. It means that unless all of the Kesef is due, it's not called Kesef. That's how we understand. Every time the Torah says something, it means the entire thing. For abundance of Amrina Nixas Kesef, to call Kesef, and the Rabbanan said even if there's some still there, it's still good enough. We actually have another example of a similar case where that's not the positions that they take. Titania, we learned about a Kohen Gadol, who Isha b'Psula. A Kohen Gadol has to marry an Isha b'Psula. And the Reb Meir tells us, Prat leboigris shekolu b'Salel divrei Reb Meir. A boigris who doesn't have all of her b'sulim, her b'sulim were diminished, she is usher to marry a Kohen Gadol. So this is very schwer, because we just had Reb Meir said, even if only part of the ksuba is payable, she still can collect mezonos because she's still considered a woman who the ksuba is owed to her. Yet here we see that when it says basula, it needs to be full basulim. And if there's only part of the basulim, it doesn't qualify to marry a kohen gadol. And Reb Elazar and Reb Shimon take the opposite perspective. Machshir the boigris. They hold the boigris is mutter, meaning even if she has partial basulim, it's still good enough. That's exactly the opposite of the approach that we had here. Lagabe ksuba. Zok Gemara, it's not shver. Because there's a special reason why they take the opposite stance from where they take here. There's psukim that change it from the standard understanding. Reb Meir Sovar, like we said here, besula is afilo mixas besulam. The default when you look at a word besula, it means mixas besulam. Just like when you look at kesef for ksuba, even partial ksuba is still considered like she's odu ksuba. But the pasuk says bisuleha. Bisuleha is an extra syllable there. Bisuleha, we darshan ad ika kula basulam. So even though normally basulam means partial basulim, but the fact that the pasuk is bisuleha to tell you that it has to be full basulim, unlike the default. And then it says bibasulah from the extra base in front of the word. We learn bechedarka in shaloi kedarka loy. A woman who is nevela shaloi kedarka is still kosher to marry a kohen. And Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon Savri, besula shlema mashma. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon have their standard approach all over Shas that when it says a word, it means completely. So therefore, besula shlema mashma. The extra word besulaha tells you afilu mixas besulim, even partial besulim will be allowed to a kohen gadol, and that's why Reb Shimon said that a boigrish is mutter to a kohen gadol, and bibisulah teaches you to you kol besulah kayomin bein b'chedarka bein b'shaloi kedarka. Reb Shimon also holds for bibisulah. Even a bia shaloi kedarka will passel her from being able to marry a kohen gadol. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we learned in Tublat. We're caught up, and the Mishnah will be namshach tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. and at 9 a.m. I want to wish everybody a good moed and a good Yom Tov. Shkoyach.
We missed you. We were seeing you. You were down south?
No, I came down with a terrible stomach virus.
So you came up already?
So I'll be back in business tomorrow, but